The rain pounded against the darkened windows as Jack Stevens peered through the peephole, his heart racing. They were out there, the HOA goons, come to make an example of him once again. Just last week, they had fined him $500 for failing to mow his lawn on the precise schedule mandated by their draconian rules. And now the black SUVs and unmarked vans lining the street could only mean one thing. They were back to deliver their latest round of justice. Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself. This time he wouldn't go down without a fight. He had spent weeks meticulously studying the HOA's bylaws, searching for any loopholes or technicalities he could exploit. And now the moment of reckoning had arrived. Suddenly the doorbell rang, a piercing sound that cut through the eerie silence. Jack gripped the baseball bat he had positioned nearby, his knuckles turning white. They're not getting in without a fight, he thought grimly. The doorbell rang again, followed by a loud pounding. Open up, Stevens. This is the HOA. A gruff voice bellowed. You're in violation of Section 4.2, Paragraph 7. Failure to maintain acceptable window treatments. Jack clenched his jaw, his mind racing. Window treatments? Really? He had always hated those damn rules, but he had never imagined the HOA would go to such lengths to enforce them. Last chance, Stevens, the voice shouted. Open up, or we'll be forced to take appropriate action. Jack knew what that meant. The HOA was notorious for its heavy-handed tactics, and he had seen firsthand what they were capable of. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Steeling his nerves, Jack slowly opened the door, his baseball bat hidden behind his back. What seems to be the problem, officers? He asked, feigning innocence. The HOA representatives, a group of burly men in suits, pushed their way inside, their eyes scanning the room. We've received a complaint about your window treatments, Stevens, one of them said, his voice dripping with disdain. You have 24 hours to bring them into compliance, or we'll be forced to take drastic measures. Jack nodded, his mind racing. Of course, he said, his voice calm and measured. I'll get right on that. The HOA representatives exchanged a knowing glance, and Jack knew that they didn't believe him. They were there to make an example of him, and they wouldn't leave until they had gotten what they wanted. As the HOA representatives turned to leave, Jack struck. With a swift motion, he brought the baseball bat down on the nearest representative's head, sending him crumpling to the ground. The others whirled around, their hands reaching for their weapons, but Jack was faster. He ducked and weaved, using the bat to fend off the HOA goons as they closed in on him. The sound of shattering glass and the thud of bodies hitting the floor filled the air, and Jack knew he was in a fight for his life. But he wasn't about to give up without a fight. He had spent too long fighting the HOA's oppressive rules, and he wasn't about to let them win this time. As the last of the HOA representatives lay unconscious at his feet, Jack surveyed the damage, his heart pounding. They won't be back anytime soon, he thought grimly. But I know they'll be back. And when they do, I'll be ready, With that, he closed the door, locking it securely behind him. The battle had just begun, and Jack Stevens was determined to come out on top. The night was thick with tension as Jack peered out the window, his eyes scanning the dark streets for any sign of movement. The HOA goons had been dispatched, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they returned, fueled by their thirst for revenge. He had bought himself some time, but the clock was ticking. The HOA was not known for its patience or its mercy, and Jack knew that he would have to stay one step ahead of them if he wanted to come out of this unscathed. Turning away from the window, he made his way to the living room, where he had set up a makeshift command center. Dozens of documents and files were spread out on the coffee table, each one meticulously cataloged and organized. Jack had spent countless hours poring over the HOA's bylaws, searching for any loopholes or weaknesses that he could exploit. And now, with the HOA's attack fresh in his mind, he knew that he would need to put his knowledge to the test. As he sat down, his eyes fell on a particular file, one that he had been saving for just such an occasion. It was a collection of damning evidence that he had been gathering for months, a paper trail that could bring the HOA down once and for all. With a determined expression, Jack began to carefully review the documents, his mind racing as he plotted his next move. He knew that he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. One wrong step could mean the end of his fight against the HOA's tyranny. Just then, the sound of a car door slamming outside caught his attention. Jack froze, his heart pounding in his chest. They're back, he thought, his grip tightening on the baseball bat that lay nearby. Cautiously, he made his way to the window, peering out into the darkness. To his relief, it was not the HOA, but rather his neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, fumbling with her keys as she made her way to her front door. Jack let out a sigh of relief. The moment was short-lived, as he watched a dark van pulled up to the curb, and several figures emerged, their faces obscured by the shadows. Jack's eyes widened as he recognized the HOA insignia on the side of the van. Asterisk here going after Mrs. Wilkins, asterisk he realized, his mind racing. Without hesitation, Jack grabbed the baseball bat and rushed out the door, determined to protect his neighbor from the HOA's wrath. As he approached Mrs. Wilkins' house, he could hear the sound of raised voices and the distinct crack of wood splintering. Bursting through the front door, Jack found Mrs. Wilkins cowering in the corner, her eyes wide with fear as the HOA representatives loomed over her, their faces twisted with fury. "What's the meaning of this?" Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The HOA representatives whirled around, their hands reaching for their weapons. "Stay out of this, Stevens," one of them growled. "This doesn't concern you." But Jack wasn't about to back down. "The hell it doesn't," he shot back, his grip tightening on the baseball bat. "You're trespassing on private property and terrorizing my neighbor. I won't stand for it." The HOA representatives exchanged a glance, and Jack could see the calculation in their eyes. They knew that he was a formidable opponent, and they were weighing their options. Suddenly, one of them lunged forward, his fist connecting with Jack's jaw. Jack staggered back, his vision blurring, but he refused to go down. With a roar of defiance, he swung the baseball bat, connecting with the representative's midsection and sending him crumpling to the ground. The others quickly followed suit, their cries of pain and surprise filling the air. As the last of the HOA goons lay unconscious at his feet, Jack turned to Mrs. Wilkins, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft. Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her eyes still wide with fear. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack nodded, his mind already racing ahead to his next move. The HOA had underestimated him once, and he wasn't about to let them make the same mistake again. Asterisk, this is war, asterisk, he thought grimly, asterisk, and I'm going to win, asterisk. The rain had stopped, but the tension in the air was palpable as Jack Stevens surveyed the damage. The HOA representatives lay sprawled on the floor, their bodies unmoving, and Jack knew that he had only bought himself a brief respite. Turning to Mrs. Wilkins, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Are you sure you're all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her eyes still wide with fear. "I'm fine, Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "But what are we going to do? The HOA won't just let this go." Jack knew she was right. The HOA was not known for its forgiveness, and he had just dealt them a major blow. He could only imagine the fury that was building in their ranks, and he knew that they would stop at nothing to extract their revenge. "Don't worry, Mrs. Wilkins," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I've been planning for this moment for a long time. I have a plan." With that, he turned and headed back to his own house, his mind racing as he formulated his next move. He knew that he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. One wrong step could mean the end of his fight against the HOA's tyranny. As he entered his living room, his eyes fell on the stack of documents he had been studying earlier. Asterisk, this is it, asterisk, he thought, a grim smile spreading across his face. Asterisk, the HOA is a Achilles heel, asterisk. He quickly gathered the files and made his way to his car, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knew that he was about to take a major risk, but he also knew that it was the only way to bring the HOA down once and for all. As he drove through the deserted streets, the rain began to fall again, the droplets pounding against the windshield. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white. Asterisk, this is it, asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, no turning back now, asterisk. He pulled up to a large, imposing building, its facade adorned with the HOA's logo. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and made his way to the front door, his grip tightening on the files he carried. As he approached the door, he could see a security camera tracking his every move. Asterisk, they're already on alert, asterisk, he thought, his heart racing. Asterisk, but I'm ready for them, asterisk. Steeling his nerves, he pushed open the door and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of threat. The lobby was empty, save for a lone receptionist who eyed him warily. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Jack took a step forward, his expression calm and confident. "Yes, I need to speak with the HOA board immediately," he said, his voice steady. "It's a matter of the utmost importance." The receptionist hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. Jack shook his head. "No, but this can't wait," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "It's about a serious breach of her own bylaws." The receptionist's eyes widened, and Jack knew that he had her attention. "One moment, please," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Moments later, the sound of footsteps echoed through the lobby, and Jack turned to see a group of HOA representatives approaching, their faces set in grim determination. "Mr. Stevens," one of them said, his voice dripping with disdain. "What a surprise to see you here." Jack smiled, his grip tightening on the files he carried. "I have something you might be interested in," he said, his voice calm and measured. The HOA representatives exchanged a glance, and Jack knew that he had their attention. Asterisk, this is it, asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, time to play my hand, asterisk. With a flourish, he held up the files, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Gentlemen, he said, his voice filled with confidence. I believe I have the key to bringing down your entire operation. The HOA representatives stared at Jack, their faces a mixture of shock and rage. They had underestimated him, and now he was holding the key to their undoing in his hands. What is the meaning of this, Stephens? One of the representatives spat, his eyes narrowed to slits. Jack couldn't help but smile. Oh, I think you know exactly what this means, he said, his voice dripping with confidence. I've been gathering evidence of your corruption for months, and now I'm ready to bring it all to light. The representatives exchanged a nervous glance, and Jack could see the panic in their eyes. They had built their empire on a foundation of fear and intimidation, and now that foundation was crumbling. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Stephens, another representative growled, his fists clenching at his sides. If you think you can just waltz in here and... Save it, Jack interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. I know all about your secret slush fund, your kickbacks, and your illegal dealings with local contractors, and I have the proof to back it all up. The representatives fell silent, their faces pale with the realization that their carefully constructed web of deceit was about to unravel. So here's what's going to happen, Jack continued, his voice calm and measured. You're going to call off your goons and leave my neighbor alone. And in exchange, I'll keep my mouth shut and let you all slink off into the shadows. The representatives exchanged another glance, and Jack could see the wheels turning in their minds. They knew that they were cornered, and they were desperately searching for a way out. And what if we refuse? One of them finally asked, his voice laced with defiance. Jack smiled, his eyes glinting with a cold, hard determination. Then I'll make sure that every single one of you ends up behind bars, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I have enough evidence to bring down this entire organization, and I am not afraid to use it. The representatives fell silent, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. Jack knew that he had them right where he wanted them, and he wasn't about to let them off the hook. So what's it going to be? He asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Are you going to play ball, or are you going to take your chances with the authorities? The representatives exchanged one last glance, and then, one by one, they began to nod their heads in reluctant agreement. Fine, one of them spat, his voice laced with bitterness. We'll back off your neighbor, but this isn't over, Stephens. You've made a powerful enemy today, and we won't forget it. Jack smiled, his grip tightening on the files in his hands. Oh, I'm counting on it, he said, his voice dripping with triumph. Because the next time you try to pull one of your little stunts, I'll be ready. With that, he turned and strode out of the building, his head held high. He knew that he had just won a major victory, but he also knew that the war was far from over. As he climbed into his car and started the engine, he couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. He had taken on the HOA and come out on top, and he knew that this was only the beginning. Asterisk, watch your back, HOA asterisk, he thought grimly. Asterisk because I'm just getting started, asterisk. The storm had passed, but the air was still thick with tension as Jack Stephens made his way back to his house. His confrontation with the HOA had left him feeling both exhilarated and uneasy, as he knew that their retreat was only a temporary respite. As he pulled into his driveway, he couldn't help but glance over at Mrs. Wilkins' house, where the shattered remnants of the HOA's attack still lay. He knew that his actions had put her in harm's way, and he felt a pang of guilt wash over him. Stepping out of his car, he made his way to her front door and knocked, his heart pounding in his chest. When she opened the door, he could see the fear and uncertainty in her eyes. Mrs. Wilkins, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice laced with regret. I never meant for you to get caught in the crossfire like that. Mrs. Wilkins shook her head, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Don't be, Jack, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'm just grateful that you were there to protect me. Jack nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. Well, I just wanted to make sure you were all right, he said, his voice soft, and to let you know that the HOA has backed off for now. Mrs. Wilkins' eyes widened, and she reached out to grasp his arm. Really? She asked, her voice filled with hope. How did you manage that? Jack smiled, a glint of triumph in his eyes. Let's just say I had a little leverage, he said, his voice laced with satisfaction. Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her expression one of awe and admiration. Well, whatever you did, I'm grateful, she said, her voice sincere. The HOA has been terrorizing this neighborhood for far too long, and it's about time someone stood up to them. Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in her words. He had always known that the HOA was a corrupt and oppressive organization, but he had never imagined that he would be the one to take them on. Don't worry, Mrs. Wilkins, he said, his voice firm. I'm not done with them yet. I'm going to make sure that they pay for everything they've done. Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her eyes filled with a newfound determination. "Well, you can count on me to help in any way I can," she said, her voice resolute. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie that he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Wilkins," he said, his voice warm. "But for now, I think it's best if you keep your head down. The HOA is still a force to be reckoned with, and I don't want them to come after you again." Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her expression serious. "All right, Jack," she said, her voice laced with concern. "But please be careful. I don't want to see you get hurt either." Jack nodded, his mind already racing with his next move. He knew that the HOA would be coming for him, and he needed to be prepared. As he turned to leave, he couldn't help but feel a sense of resolve wash over him. He had taken the first step in his fight against the HOA, and he wasn't about to back down now. Asterisk, watch your back, HOA asterisk, he thought grimly. Asterisk, because I'm just getting started, asterisk. The air was thick with tension as Jack Stevens pored over the documents he had gathered from the HOA's headquarters. He knew that he had struck a major blow against their corrupt empire, but he also knew that they would not go down without a fight. His eyes scanned the pages, searching for any additional evidence that could help him bring the HOA to its knees. He had uncovered a tangled web of lies, kickbacks, and illegal dealings, and he was determined to expose it all. Just then, the sound of a car door slamming outside caught his attention. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest as he peered out the window. To his relief, it was only Mrs. Wilkins returning home from a late-night errand. Jack let out a sigh of relief, but the moment was short-lived. As he watched, another car pulled up behind Mrs. Wilkins, and two figures emerged, their faces obscured by the darkness. Jack's eyes narrowed as he recognized the HOA insignia on the side of the car. Asterisk, they're back, asterisk, he thought, his grip tightening on the documents in his hand. Without hesitation, he grabbed his car keys and raced out the door, determined to protect his neighbor from the HOA's wrath. As he approached Mrs. Wilkins' house, he could hear the sound of raised voices and the distinct crack of wood splintering. Bursting through the front door, Jack found Mrs. Wilkins cowering in the corner, her eyes wide with fear as the HOA representatives loomed over her, their faces twisted with fury. "What's the meaning of this?" Jack shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The HOA representatives whirled around, their hands reaching for their weapons. "We warned you, Stevens," one of them growled. "You should have stayed out of our business." Jack shook his head, his eyes burning with a righteous fury. "This isn't your business," he shot back. "This is about terrorizing innocent people, and I won't stand for it." The HOA representatives exchanged a glance, and Jack could see the calculation in their eyes. They knew that he was a formidable opponent, and they were weighing their options. Suddenly, one of them lunged forward, his fist connecting with Jack's jaw. Jack staggered back, his vision blurring, but he refused to go down. With a roar of defiance, he swung the documents he had been holding, the pages fluttering in the air as he unleashed a barrage of accusations and evidence against the HOA. The representatives recoiled, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. They knew that they had been caught, and they knew that their empire was crumbling around them. "This is over," Jack said, his voice low and dangerous. "I've got enough evidence to bring you all down, and I'm not going to stop until you're behind bars." The representatives exchanged another glance, and then one by one they began to back away, their faces pale with defeat. "This isn't over, Stevens," one of them spat, his voice laced with venom. "You made a powerful enemy today, and we won't forget it." Jack smiled, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Oh, I'm counting on it," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because the next time you try to pull one of your little stunts, I'll be ready." As the HOA representatives retreated, Jack turned to Mrs. Wilkins, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Mrs. Wilkins nodded, her eyes still wide with fear. "I am now," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Jack. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. He had taken on the HOA and won, and he knew that this was just the beginning. Asterisk, watch your back, HOA asterisk, he thought, his eyes narrowed with determination. Asterisk, because I'm not done with you yet, asterisk. The air was thick with tension as Jack Stevens stood at the podium, his eyes scanning the sea of faces before him. The small community center was packed with his neighbors, all of them eager to hear what he had to say. He had called this emergency meeting in the wake of his latest confrontation with the HOA, and he knew that the stakes had never been higher. The corrupt organization had already shown that they were willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their empire, and he was determined to put an end to their reign of terror once and for all. As he cleared his throat, the room fell silent, all eyes fixed on him. "My fellow neighbors," he began, his voice strong and unwavering. "I stand before you today with a grave warning. The HOA is not just a nuisance, it is a criminal organization that must be stopped." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Jack knew that he had their attention. I have spent months gathering evidence of their corruption, their kickbacks, and their illegal dealings, he continued, his voice rising in intensity. And I'm here to tell you that it's time to fight back. The crowd erupted in a chorus of cheers and applause, and Jack knew that he had struck a chord. The HOA had long been the bane of this community, and the residents were fed up with their heavy-handed tactics and unfair rules. But we can't do this alone, Jack cautioned, his expression serious. We need to band together to stand united against this common enemy. Only then will we have the power to bring them down. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Jack could see the determination in their eyes. They were ready to fight, and he was more than willing to lead the charge. Now I know that the HOA is a powerful organization, he said, his voice low and serious. They have deep pockets, they have political connections, and they have a long history of intimidation and retaliation. The crowd fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. But we have something they don't, Jack continued, his voice filled with conviction. We have the truth on our side. We have the evidence to expose their corruption, and we have the courage to stand up to their bullying tactics. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Jack knew that he had their support. So who's with me? He asked, his voice ringing out through the room. The response was deafening as the residents of the community rose to their feet, their fists pumping in the air. Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and determination. Then let's get to work, he said, his voice firm and resolute. We have a lot to do and we don't have much time. As the meeting drew to a close, Jack found himself surrounded by his neighbors, all of them eager to lend their support to the cause. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was more than ready to face the challenge. Asterisk, watch your back, HOA asterisk, he thought, his eyes narrowed with determination. Asterisk, because this neighborhood is united and we're coming for you, asterisk. The rain had returned, beating a steady rhythm against the windows as Jack Stevens pored over the documents spread out before him. The community center was empty, save for the small group of dedicated residents who had joined him in his crusade against the HOA. It had been weeks since his rousing speech, and the momentum was building. The residents had rallied together, pooling their resources and their expertise to build a formidable case against the corrupt organization. Jack could feel the tension in the air, a palpable sense of anticipation that hung over the room like a shroud. They were close, he could feel it. The evidence they had gathered was damning, a veritable treasure trove of incriminating documents and damning testimony. But he also knew that the HOA would not go down without a fight. They were a powerful and ruthless entity, with deep pockets and a well-oiled machine of intimidation and retaliation. Just then, the sound of a knock at the door broke the silence, and Jack felt a surge of adrenaline course through his veins. Asterisk, this is it, asterisk, he thought, his heart pounding in his chest. Striding to the door, he peered through the peephole and felt a chill run down his spine. It was the HOA representatives, their faces twisted with fury. Steeling his nerves, Jack opened the door, his expression calm and composed. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The representatives pushed their way inside, their eyes scanning the room with a predatory intensity. "We've had enough of your little crusade," Stephens, one of them, growled, his voice laced with venom. Jack couldn't help but smile, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Oh, I think you'll find that we're just getting started," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The representatives exchanged a glance, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. They had come to intimidate and bully, but they were clearly not prepared for the level of resistance they were facing. "You don't know what you're up against," Stephens, another representative, hissed, his fists clenching at his sides. "The HOA has been around for decades, and we're not about to let some upstart like you bring us down." Jack couldn't help but laugh, his voice dripping with contempt. "Oh, I think you'll find that we're more than capable of bringing you down," he said, his eyes narrowing. "In fact, we've got enough evidence to put every last one of you behind bars." The representatives fell silent, their faces pale with the realization that their empire was crumbling around them. Jack could see the fear in their eyes, and he knew that he had them right where he wanted them. "So here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice firm and unyielding. "You're going to leave this community alone, and you're going to disband the HOA for good. And in exchange, we'll make sure that none of your dirty little secrets ever see the light of day." The representatives exchanged another glance, and Jack could see the wheels turning in their minds. They knew that they were cornered, and they were desperately searching for a way out. "And what if we refuse?" one of them finally asked, his voice laced with defiance. Jack smiled, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Then you can say goodbye to your precious empire," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because we got enough evidence to bring the whole thing crashing down around you." The representatives fell silent, their faces etched with defeat. They knew that they had been outmaneuvered, and they had no choice but to surrender. As they turned to leave, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. He had won, and he knew that the HOA would never be the same again. Asterisk, watch your back. HOA asterisk, he thought, his eyes narrowed with determination. Asterisk, because this community is ours and we're not going anywhere asterisk.